Good evening and welcome back to Haunted Tales. Tonight, we journey deep into the frozen wilderness of Canada's Yukon territory, a place where the long winter nights stretch endlessly and the silence hides secrets darker than the cold itself. From the abandoned mining camps of Dawson City to the lonely, windswept shores of Lake LaBerge, we'll uncover chilling accounts that have remained buried in ice and fear for decades. These aren't just campfire stories whispered for thrills. They are testimonies from real witnesses, encounters with the unexplained, and disappearances that continue to defy every attempt at reason. Some were investigated, many were silenced, and most remain unsolved. What you're about to hear has haunted those who lived through it. Stories so disturbing that even today, survivors struggle to speak of them. If this is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe to Haunted Tales and turn on notifications so you never miss when the darkness calls. Now, settle in as we step into the shadows of the Yukon, where the wilderness swallows all certainty and terror walks silently beside you. The Klondike Highway stretches like a black scar across the Yukon wilderness, cutting through endless forests, icy rivers, and windswept valleys that seem untouched by time. By day, it offers staggering beauty, towering peaks dusted with snow, alpine lakes shimmering in silence, and stretches of road so lonely you can drive for hours without passing another soul. But by night, when the cold descends and the northern sky fills with its eerie glow, this same highway transforms into something else entirely. Drivers have long whispered about what lurks on its shoulders, about the pale figure that waits in the dark, silently raising her arm for a ride she does not truly need. For decades, truckers, miners, and travelers passing between Whitehorse and Dawson City have told nearly identical stories. A young woman, often described in clothing from another era, a plain dress, sometimes a shawl, hair long and dark, standing by the roadside. She looks lost, fragile, and vulnerable, and more than one kind-hearted driver has slowed to let her climb aboard. The problem is, she never stays for long. Somewhere between one bend and the next, she disappears. But to understand why so many in the Yukon still dread encountering her, you have to go back to the very roots of this land, to its tragedies, its ghosts, and the silence that falls after accidents that leave no survivors. The Klondike Highway, first constructed in the 1950s and paved decades later, follows routes that prospectors and stampeders once took during the Klondike Gold Rush. Tens of thousands of desperate men and women, chasing fortune in the frozen north, trudged through snow and mud, battling starvation, frostbite, and exhaustion. Many never made it. Graves are scattered all along these trails, some marked, many not, claimed by avalanches, drowning, or violence in the lawless boomtowns. When the modern road was laid down, it was paved across layers of forgotten tragedy. The ghosts of those who died never left. They merely lingered in silence, waiting for new travelers to pass through their realm. Michael Green, a trucker from Alberta, was hauling a load of timber up the Klondike in the fall of 1987. He recalls the night with perfect clarity because, as he put it later in a police statement, "You don't forget a passenger who isn't there when you look back." It was just past midnight, the frost glinting on his windshield when he saw her. She was standing on the right shoulder, he told investigators, not waving frantically or anything, just standing there like she knew I'd stop. She had long hair, dark brown, and a plain kind of dress, nothing modern. Looked about 20, maybe younger. Something about her eyes. They weren't scared, they weren't hopeful either, just tired. Green pulled over. He was used to lonely travelers. The highway could swallow you if you broke down without help, and he figured he was saving a life. She opened the passenger door without a word. Green continued. Got in, sat real quiet. I said, "Where you headed?" But she didn't answer. She just kept looking straight ahead. I thought maybe she was shy or, I don't know. The way she sat, it was like she'd been in that seat 100 times. They drove for nearly 20 minutes. Green remembers telling her about his haul, about his family back home. She said nothing, but when he glanced over, she was gone. "I swear to God," he said, his voice cracking. 1 second she was there. I looked back to the road, looked again. Empty seat. Door still shut tight. Heat blasting, no sound. She was gone. Shaken, Green pulled over, checking his cab with a flashlight, even climbing down to scan the road behind him. There was no trace of her. He reported the incident at the next way station, not because he believed in ghosts, but because he feared something was wrong with him. A hallucination, maybe carbon monoxide poisoning. Medical exams later cleared him. He was healthy. The only explanation anyone gave him was one that still made his skin crawl. He had met the phantom hitchhiker of the Klondike Highway. Stories of vanishing hitchhikers are not unique to the Yukon. Across North America, highways are haunted by young women who climb into cars, ask for a ride home, then disappear, often said to be the spirits of accident victims. But the Klondike Phantom has a consistency that makes it chilling. Some say she was a young prospector's wife in the early 1900s who froze to death waiting for her husband to return. Others whisper that she was killed in a drunk driving accident in the 1950s, her body buried in a shallow grave near the road. Still others insist she is older than all of that, a restless spirit from before the gold rush, a wandering soul tied to the land itself. The First Nations people of the region speak of shadow walkers, spirits that take human form to test or warn travelers. Some are benign, some are not. Elders caution that when you meet one, you must not offer them a ride, for to take them aboard is to invite death itself. In the summer of 1999, two friends, Daniel and Corey, both in their early 20s, were driving up from Whitehorse to Dawson for the annual music festival. The midnight sun lingered on the horizon, washing the trees in gold, but by the time they reached the darker stretches near Carmack's, the road was empty. That's when they saw her. She was just standing there, Corey later said in a taped interview, bare feet on the gravel. A dress that looked old, like something from my grandma's photos. She didn't even put her thumb out, but Dan slowed down anyway. Daniel remembers rolling the window down and asking if she needed help. She nodded once, silently, and climbed into the back seat. I asked where she was going, Daniel said. No answer. I figured maybe she didn't speak English, so I just kept driving. For 40 minutes, they drove with her in the back seat, both of them too nervous to look back too often. But eventually, Daniel glanced in the mirror. The seat was empty. Just empty. We both turned around. No door opened, no sound, nothing. She was gone. They pulled over, panicked, and checked the car, but she wasn't there. They finished their drive in silence, too shaken to talk. Only after reaching Dawson did they hear from locals that others had seen the same woman. That's just the Klondike ghost, one bartender said with a shrug, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. The Yukon RCMP has never issued an official statement on the phantom hitchhiker, but officers privately admit that calls come in every few years. Travelers report picking someone up, only for their passenger to vanish. In one chilling 2006 case, a tourist couple from Germany stopped at a roadside cafe near Pelly Crossing, pale and trembling. They swore they had given a young woman a ride who disappeared just before they reached the cafe. Their rental car was checked, their story logged. Nothing came of it, but the entry remains in local police archives. No one knows for certain why the hitchhiker remains. Some believe she seeks closure, a ride she never received, a destination she never reached. Others say she is a warning to travelers. Respect the road, drive carefully, or you too may become one of the forgotten dead. Truckers whisper that if she appears in your cab, it is a sign you won't survive your next run. More than one fatal accident along the Klondike has been rumored to have followed a sighting of the Phantom, though these claims are impossible to verify. To this day, people traveling the Klondike Highway glance nervously at the shoulders of the road, especially at night. Some refuse to stop for hitchhikers at all, too afraid of picking up the wrong passenger. Others, perhaps braver or more reckless, still pull over when they see her and come away with the same haunting story. A young woman climbs in. She sits in silence, and then, without warning, she is gone. The Klondike is a road of fortune and ruin, a passage built upon the bones of history. It carries. There is something profoundly unsettling about silence, the kind that hangs heavy in the air where there should be life, where voices, laughter, and the sounds of everyday survival once echoed, now replaced by nothing but wind moving through the trees, In the Yukon, there is one silence that has haunted locals for generations. The mystery of the village that simply vanished. Upper Leard, a small settlement near the Alaska Highway, has long been a stopping point for travelers moving between Watson Lake and Whitehorse. Today, it is home to a modest community, but stories persist of an older camp, deeper in the wilderness, where an entire group of people disappeared without a trace. Fires still smoldered in their hearths, food sat waiting to be eaten, but the people, men, women, and children, were gone. To this day, no one knows why. The tale is sometimes compared to the infamous Lake Anjikuni mystery of Nunavut, where a whole Inuit village was allegedly discovered deserted in the 1930s. But here, in the Yukon, the story feels closer, heavier, as though the trees themselves remember what happened. Indigenous elders speak of it with caution, never naming the exact location, warning that to wander too deep into that part of the forest is to risk joining the vanished. In hushed tones, they speak of spirits that take villages whole. Some say it was the work of malevolent beings from the shadow world, others that the people were called to another place, another existence. Outsiders, however, have sought more earthly explanations: starvation, disease, or an attack by rival groups. But none of those theories explain the eerie details: the burning fires, the food laid out, and the tracks that simply ended, as if the villagers had walked into thin air. The earliest written mention of the vanishing village of the Upper Liard comes from a prospector named Thomas Rayburn, who stumbled into Watson Lake in 1942, shaken and pale. He told locals he had discovered an abandoned settlement 2 days' hike north of the Alaska Highway. There were about 8 cabins, Rayburn later wrote in his journal, which was found among his belongings after his death. All of them neat, in use. Smoke still rising from one chimney. Pots of stew sat cooling. Fish drying racks hung full, but there wasn't a soul in sight. I called out, nothing. I searched the cabins. Everything was in place: tools, clothes, blankets, sleds. But the people were gone. Rayburn claimed he followed tracks leading away from the settlement, but they stopped abruptly at the edge of the forest. It was like they had been swallowed by the earth, he wrote. One moment, dozens of footprints. The next, nothing but undisturbed snow. When he brought his story to officials, they dismissed it as imagination or embellishment. The war was raging, resources were stretched thin, and no one had time to chase ghost villages in the Yukon. But locals remembered. 2 decades later, a hunter named James McLeod gave his own account. He was tracking moose near the Liard River when he stumbled across old log cabins hidden among the trees. The structures were weathered but intact. What unnerved him most was what he found inside. There were blankets laid out on the bunks, McLeod told a reporter in 1963. Tools lined up neat on the shelves, like someone had just stepped out to fetch water. But everything was thick with dust. No footprints, no sign of anyone for years. It felt wrong, like the place was waiting. He didn't linger. He said he felt watched the entire time, though he never saw who or what was looking at him. In 1998, 2 hikers from British Columbia, a couple named Sarah and Peter, reported stumbling across the same site. By then, only 3 of the cabins remained standing, their roofs sagging under decades of snow. But they described a stillness that was suffocating. Sarah later told a Whitehorse radio host, "It wasn't just abandoned. It was like the air was wrong there. We heard whispers in the trees, but no wind was blowing." Peter thought he saw someone standing between the cabins, just a shadow watching us. When we blinked, it was gone. They left in a hurry, abandoning some of their gear. Weeks later, when they returned with a friend to retrieve it, they could not find the cabins again. The forest had swallowed them, or they had wandered into a place that didn't want to be found twice. Over the years, several explanations have been offered. Starvation or disease. Critics argue the villagers may have fled due to illness or food shortages. But why leave meals still steaming, fires burning? Violent attack. Some suggest raiders forced them out. Yet no signs of struggle, blood, or damage to the homes were ever reported. Spiritual explanation, elders of the Casca. Dina speak of the taken people, a group who wandered too close to sacred ground and were drawn into the spirit world. UFO theories. Fringe enthusiasts claim the abrupt disappearance and lack of tracks suggests something otherworldly. Abduction on a mass scale. No theory sits comfortably. Each leaves gaps. And the story persists because those who've stumbled across the cabins describe the same feeling. The air itself becomes heavy, unnatural, as though one has stepped into a place that should not be touched. Truckers passing near Upper Liard on the Alaska Highway sometimes call in strange lights deep in the forest, bluish orbs weaving among the trees, too large to be campfires, too smooth to be lanterns. Hikers who stray from the road claim to hear faint laughter drifting on the wind, the sound of children at play. When they follow it, the forest closes in and the voices fade, leaving only silence. One RCMP patrol in 2003 reported finding footprints leading into the woods, dozens of them, barefoot, small and large, like an entire group had walked into the night. They followed the trail for half a kilometer before it simply ended. No prints leading back, no bodies ever found. The officer's written account is sparse, but in the margins he scrawled 3 words: not natural, wrong. What terrifies people most is not the idea of one ghost, or even a single tragic accident, but the thought of an entire community disappearing in silence. A family can vanish. A lone traveler can be taken by the cold, but a whole village gone without a trace. That leaves behind not just grief but dread, the sense that whatever force claimed them could come again, to anyone, anywhere. The story is told around fires in Watson Lake, murmured in cafes along the highway, and passed to new travelers as a warning. Don't wander too far into the woods around Upper Liard. Some places don't want to be found. Some places take more than they give. Today, no map marks the vanished settlement. Some say the forest has reclaimed it completely. Others whisper that the cabins still stand, but only reveal themselves to certain people at certain times. And those who see them risk joining the silence. What remains is a legend tied to the land itself. A reminder that in the vast, lonely wilderness of the Yukon, the line between the living and the vanished is thin, fragile, and easily crossed. And if you ever find yourself traveling through Upper Liard, and the wind falls still, and the trees around you hush their voices, listen carefully. The Yukon is a land defined by extremes. Endless mountains, frozen rivers, forests so vast they feel eternal. But tucked away, just outside the small community of Carcross, lies a place that feels entirely out of step with the rest of the territory: a desert. It is often called the world's smallest desert, barely a square mile of sand dunes hemmed in by towering mountains and alpine lakes. To travelers, it is a curiosity, a roadside stop where the cold wind blows fine grains of sand across a barren landscape. Yet ask the locals, especially the elders of the Carcross Tagish First Nation, and you will hear warnings. This is not an empty place. The desert is alive, shifting, restless. Its sands remember blood and sorrow, and its winds carry voices that are not your own. For generations, stories have circulated of people who wandered into the dunes and emerged changed, or not at all. The Carcross Desert is more than a quirk of geography. It is a graveyard, a battlefield, and some say a gateway between the living and the dead. Geologists will tell you the dunes are the remnants of a glacial lakebed, Lake Watson, drained more than 10,000 years ago. Fine sand carried by wind piled into ridges, creating this miniature desert in the subarctic north. But long before geologists put words to it, the First Nations of the region gave it meaning. Oral tradition speaks of wars fought here between rival groups, the Tagish and the Tlingit, leaving the sands soaked in blood. Some say the restless spirits of the slain still wander the dunes, whispering their rage. Others believe the desert itself is cursed ground, a place where the earth swallowed the bodies of the dead so no proper burial could be given. To this day, the Carcross Tagish people treat the desert with respect. They warn travelers not to linger after dark, not to camp on the dunes, and above all, not to ignore the voices carried on the wind. In 1974, Helen Graham, a schoolteacher from Whitehorse, visited Carcross with her husband. They had heard of the world's smallest desert and wanted to see it for themselves. It was bright, almost cheerful, Helen recalled in an interview years later. The sun was high, kids were running up the dunes, laughing, sliding down on pieces of cardboard. It didn't feel haunted at all, but as dusk fell, the atmosphere shifted. Most of the visitors packed up and left. Helen and her husband lingered, photographing the colors of the sunset spilling across the sand. That was when Helen heard it. A voice clear as day, calling my name. Helen. It came from the dunes. I thought it was my husband, but he was standing right beside me, pale as a sheet. He heard it too. The voice said his name next. It was like someone was standing just out of sight, calling us. They left in a rush, too frightened to look back. Years later, Helen still trembled when she spoke of it. I've never gone back. I know what I heard, and it wanted us to follow. In the summer of 1981, a boy from Whitehorse disappeared while visiting the desert with his family. He was 8 years old, last seen climbing one of the dunes. His footprints led up the ridge and down the other side, and then stopped. Search parties combed the area for days. Helicopters scanned the dunes, the nearby lakes, and the surrounding forest. No trace was ever found. His parents swore they had heard laughter just before he vanished. Not his laughter, but the voices of other children, echoing faintly across the sand. It was like he was running toward someone, his mother told investigators. Toward friends we couldn't see. To this day, locals say the boy never left. Travelers camping nearby claim to hear the sound of a child giggling in the dunes at night. Some have even reported seeing a small figure standing at the crest of the sand, only to watch it dissolve into the wind. Those who spend time in Carcross often mention the sound of the wind. It whistles, hums, and hisses across the dunes, shaping the sand into new forms with each storm. But there are times, they say, when it doesn't sound like wind at all. Truckers, stopping overnight on the pullouts near the desert, claim they hear voices carried through the night. Conversations too faint to understand, cries of anguish, or the unmistakable sound of their own name whispered directly into their ear. One driver, John Pelletier, described waking in his cab at 3 a.m. to the sound of someone scratching at his window. When he looked, no one was there. Instead, the wind carried what he swore were words. "Get out." Tagish elders speak of the spirit dancers, figures seen moving atop the dunes under the light of the moon. They are said to be the souls of those who died in battle centuries ago, still locked in combat, their bodies long gone, but their rage eternal. Several tourists have unknowingly described the same phenomenon, shadowy shapes flickering on the ridges, at night, darting and twisting as if locked in a struggle. One German traveler in 1992 wrote in his diary, "I thought it was a trick of my eyes. The sand was moving like smoke, shaping into people. I could see arms, legs, heads. They moved in silence, fighting each other. And then they were gone." His diary was later published by his family after he died in a climbing accident in the Alps. Locals who read it nodded grimly. They had heard the same stories for generations. In August 2005, 3 university students from British Columbia decided to spend a night camping in the desert. They had heard the ghost stories and wanted to test their courage. They set up a small fire, drank, and laughed, daring each other to wander the dunes. Around midnight, one of them, a young man named Kevin, walked to the top of a ridge. He called out to his friends, saying he saw lights moving in the distance. They thought he was teasing until he stopped laughing. He went quiet, one of his friends later said. Then he screamed. Not like a prank scream, a scream like someone was hurting him. They ran to the ridge. Kevin was gone. They searched for hours, calling his name, shining flashlights across the sand. Finally, they found him half buried in the dune, unconscious, his body cold to the touch despite the summer night. When he woke, he refused to speak about what had happened. All he would say was, "They pulled me under. The sand was hands. They wanted me to stay." Kevin dropped out of school months later. The White Pass and Yukon Route Railway is one of the most remarkable feats of engineering ever carved into the brutal northern wilderness, stretching from Skagway, Alaska, up through the mountain passes and across the border into the Yukon Territory. It was built in the feverish years of the Klondike Gold Rush. From the moment its first tracks were laid in the late 1890s, it became more than just a lifeline for prospectors. It became a place soaked in suffering, greed, and death. And with death comes ghosts. For more than a century, countless witnesses, railway workers, train passengers, hikers along the old trails, And even modern tourists have reported eerie encounters that defy explanation. Apparitions of weary miners staggering alongside the tracks, ghostly lantern lights swaying in the mist, voices of men long dead echoing through the mountains. The White Pass, as beautiful as it is dangerous, remains haunted by the restless spirits of those who perished in their pursuit of gold. Tonight, we'll descend into that darkness, tracing its blood-soaked history, reliving the testimonies of those who dared to ride its rails at night, and uncovering why this railway is still whispered about in hushed tones by the people of the North. The Road of Gold and Death, the Eye. White Pass itself earned a cruel nickname during the gold rush, the Dead Horse Trail. As thousands of men swarmed north in search of fortune, they brought with them horses, pack mules, and sled dogs, pushing their animals to the brink as they carried impossibly heavy loads up the steep, frozen slopes. Historical records estimate that more than 3,000 animals died on those trails, their bodies littering the pass in such numbers that travelers described the path as paved with bones. Some collapsed from exhaustion, others slipped on icy cliffs and plummeted to their deaths, and many were simply abandoned to starvation. But it wasn't just animals. Men died too. Avalanches buried entire groups alive. Miners froze in blizzards, their bodies only found when the snow melted months later. Bandits stalked the desperate, robbing and killing those too weak to fight back. And then came the railway, an engineering marvel carved into this brutal landscape, but one built on human misery. The White Pass and Yukon Route Railway opened in 1900, but during its construction, dozens of workers perished. Some fell into ravines, others were crushed beneath rock slides or killed by explosions. Their graves remain unmarked, their bones still hidden in the wilderness. Locals believe their spirits never left. The lantern in the mist, one of the most famous ghost stories tied to the railway, involves a spectral figure known simply as the Lantern Man. For decades, passengers on late-night trains have reported seeing a dim, flickering light bobbing in the darkness along the mountainside, keeping pace with the train. Conductors say it looks like a miner's lantern swinging gently, as if carried by an unseen hand. A retired railway worker named Harold Jensen, who spent 30 years running freight trains along the route, described it in an interview preserved by the Yukon archives. It would appear out of nowhere. You'd be halfway up the pass, snow blowing so hard you could barely see your hand in front of your face, and suddenly there's this light, keeping up with us. At first I thought it was another worker, maybe someone stranded. But it never got closer, never fell behind, just floated there. Then, just like that, it would vanish. The legend says that the Lantern Man is the ghost of a miner who lost his life searching for a missing partner during a blizzard. He wandered with his lantern until frostbite and exhaustion claimed him. Some say he's still searching, doomed to walk the frozen slopes for eternity. Passengers who never board tourists in modern times have also claimed encounters with something, someone, that doesn't belong. One chilling account comes from a couple from Vancouver who rode the railway on a summer evening excursion. They sat near the back of the train car taking photos of the scenery. At one point, the wife noticed a man standing in the open-air platform between cars. He wore tattered clothing, boots caked in mud, and his eyes looked sunken, hollow. She nudged her husband to look, but when he turned his head, the figure was gone. Thinking she had imagined it, she brushed it off. Later, as the train slowed near a curve, she looked down into a ravine and gasped, because there, half buried in moss, were what looked like old skeletal remains. The guide laughed off her story, saying many passengers see things on the White Pass, a mixture of nerves and the eerie landscape. But the woman insisted that the man she saw was as real as anyone else on that train. The crying on the tracks, another chilling phenomenon, is the sound of weeping. Conductors and maintenance crews have long whispered about nights when, while inspecting the rails, they hear faint sobbing carried on the wind. One crew in the 1970s swore they heard a child crying along the tracks near Bennett. They searched with flashlights but found nothing. No footprints, no evidence of anyone nearby. Yet the sound persisted, echoing through the trees. Some link the cries to the countless families who lost loved ones during the gold rush. Others believe it comes from the spirits of children who died during the brutal winters, carried north by parents chasing dreams of gold but never surviving the journey. The ghost train, perhaps the most terrifying reports are of an entire phantom train, Locals claim that on certain foggy nights, the screech of iron wheels and the long, mournful wail of a whistle can be heard echoing across the mountains. Yet no train is scheduled and no lights are visible. In the 1980s, a hiker near Fraser reported watching in horror as a fully lit train rounded the bend below him, cars glowing with lamplight, shadows of people moving inside. But then, without a sound, it faded into mist and was gone. The man swore he had witnessed a ghost train carrying the souls of those who died during the railway's construction. The Tunnel of Shadows 1 section of the railway passes through a short, dark tunnel blasted into the rock. Passengers often take photos here, but some later notice strange anomalies. Extra faces, blurred figures, hands reaching out of the darkness. A young woman from Juneau recalled her experience. As we entered the tunnel, I felt this sudden drop in temperature. I looked across the car and saw a man in an old miner's hat sitting alone, his face completely in shadow. I blinked and he was gone. I was so shaken I couldn't even speak until the ride ended. Railway staff quietly admit that more than one worker has refused to ride through the tunnel at night, claiming they hear footsteps running alongside the train in the pitch black. A curse of greed, many believe the hauntings stem from more than just tragic deaths. They see them as a curse. The Klondike Gold Rush was built on greed and exploitation of the land, of the indigenous people, and of the desperate men who were lured north with dreams of fortune. The Yukon is a land of extremes, towering mountains, endless forests, and long ribbons of highway that vanish into horizons few ever reach. At night, when the aurora flickers overhead and the cold eats into the bones, those highways can feel like corridors through another world. They carry freight, travelers, and memories, but they also carry shadows. For decades, truckers who run the long hauls between Watson Lake, Teslin, and Whitehorse have told a story that chills even the most hardened drivers. They speak of a rig that appears without warning, its headlights blazing in the dark. It races up behind you, bearing down with impossible speed. And then, just before collision, it vanishes into thin air. They call it the disappearing trucker of the Yukon highways. Some say it's the ghost of a driver who never made it home. Others whisper it is the spirit of a whole generation of men swallowed by these roads, doomed to forever haunt the routes they once traveled. Whatever the truth, the Yukon highways remain among the most haunted stretches of asphalt in the north. The Yukon's roads are not ordinary highways. The Klondike Highway snakes north from Skagway and Whitehorse toward Dawson City, following the old gold rush trails. The Campbell Highway winds through remote forests, connecting tiny communities where help may be hundreds of kilometers away. The Canal Road, built during wartime, still bears scars of collapse and abandonment. These routes are as dangerous as they are vital. Ice slicks form without warning. Moose wander into lanes at night, and whiteouts blind even the best drivers. The Yukon's climate is merciless. In winter, temperatures can plunge below -40. Vehicles break down and freeze solid. Engines stall. And sometimes drivers disappear with no trace. In the past 50 years, the RCMP has recorded dozens of cases where rigs were found abandoned on the shoulder, doors hanging open, cargo untouched, yet no driver in sight. Search parties combed the forests. Dogs picked up no trail. In many of these cases, the drivers were never found. It is in this context that the legend of the disappearing trucker takes root. Old-timers say the sightings began in the late 1960s, as modern trucking took hold in the Yukon. Drivers returning from Whitehorse would speak of a semi that came out of nowhere. Headlights blinding, horn roaring, closing fast on their mirrors. One of the earliest reports was logged in 1971 by a Whitehorse RCMP patrol. A trucker named Bill Hanley swore he had nearly been crushed outside Teslin. He described a set of lights in his rearview mirror, bearing down on him until they filled the cab with glare. Terrified, he pulled onto the shoulder and braced for impact. But when he looked back, nothing. The road was empty, the night silent. His own tracks were the only ones in the snow. Bill refused to drive that stretch again. He sold his rig within the year and left the territory. Perhaps the most infamous account comes from a veteran trucker named Jack Moose Taylor. In a taped interview preserved by the Yukon Transportation Museum, his voice trembles as he recalls a night on the Klondike Highway near Carmacks in the winter of 1983. Snow was coming down sideways, heavy stuff. I'd been hauling freight from Whitehorse all night, dead tired. Around mile 210, I see this glow in my mirrors. Two big lights moving fast. I thought, Jesus, someone's gonna plow right into me. I gripped the wheel, heart pounding, waiting for the slam. The lights filled the cab, brighter and brighter, and then they just blinked out. Road behind me was black as pitch. Not a thing there. I pulled over shaking, climbed down to check. No tire tracks, no nothing. Just my own rig and a silence so thick you could choke on it. Jack said he never forgot the feeling that whoever was behind those lights was not alive. In 1992, a case made headlines in the Yukon News. A trucker named David Carlson disappeared while hauling fuel between Watson Lake and Whitehorse. His rig was found idling on the shoulder at dawn, headlights still on, cargo intact. The driver's door stood open. His gloves lay neatly on the seat, but David himself was gone. Search crews scoured the surrounding woods for days. Helicopters flew overhead, volunteers combed every ditch and ravine. Not a single footprint was found in the snow. Some of Carlson's fellow drivers began whispering that he had seen the phantom truck and that it had taken him with it. To this day, his case remains unsolved. Truckers claim the disappearing trucker is not always alone. There are stories of entire convoys, lines of headlights gliding silently along the highway, only to vanish when approached. One chilling account came from a hiker near Fox Lake in the early 2000s. He reported watching from a ridge as a string of rigs rolled north along the highway below him. He counted at least 6, their headlights glowing faintly in the dusk. But no sound reached him. Not the growl of engines, not the hiss of air brakes. Just silence. Then as he watched, the lights winked out one by one until the highway was dark. When he later checked with the RCMP, no convoys had been logged that night. Many truckers keep their CB radios on through the night, voices crackling across the empty miles to fight off fatigue. But some report strange interruptions on certain stretches near Teslin. A female voice cuts in, distant and full of static. She calls out for help, saying she's lost, that her truck is in the ditch. Drivers try to respond, but the signal fades. No wreck is ever found. Some believe she is the ghost of a driver who perished in the 1970s, trapped in her rig during a blizzard. Her calls for help still bleed into the radios of those who pass by. Skeptics point to rational causes. Fatigue, isolation, and the hypnotic rhythm of endless kilometers can trick the brain into seeing things. Atmospheric refraction in the freezing Yukon air can create illusions of headlights. CB radio bleed from distant stations might sound like ghostly voices, but none of that explains the missing men. None of that explains why rigs are found still running, cargo untouched, yet drivers gone. Among some of the Yukon First Nations, there is an older explanation. Elders say the highways cut through land watched over by restless spirits. The trails, rivers, and forests hold memories of those who died during the gold rush, of hunters lost in storms, of travelers who never returned. One Tagish elder, speaking anonymously to a folklorist in the 1990s, said, "The road is alive. It remembers every death, every blood spilled on it. Sometimes it shows you those who never left, and sometimes, if you are unlucky, it takes you too." Over time, drivers have noticed patterns. The phantom truck most often appears in winter. During snowstorms, it favors the long stretch between Watson Lake and Teslin, though sightings occur as far north as Carmacks. Drivers hauling dangerous loads, fuel, explosives, heavy freight, seem more likely to encounter it. The lights always appear behind, never ahead, as if chasing the living. Some say it is the embodiment of death itself on the highway, stalking those who carry the heaviest burdens. Drivers who survive an encounter describe the silence as the worst part. After the lights vanish, the night feels unnaturally still, the air heavy with dread. One man swore that after seeing the phantom lights, his engine sputtered and died. He sat in freezing silence for an hour before it roared back to life. He told friends it felt as if the road itself had paused, waiting to decide if he would be allowed to continue. The Yukon highways remain vital lifelines, carrying freight, tourists, and locals through some of the most unforgiving terrain on Earth. Yet ask any veteran trucker who has run the Watson Lake Teslin stretch in the dead of night, and they'll tell you the same. The road has eyes. They'll grip their mugs of coffee tighter, stare off into the distance, and lower their voices as they say, "If you see the lights behind you, don't look too long. Don't pull over, just keep driving." Because some of those trucks, they aren't really there, and if you let them catch you, you might never be seen again. The Yukon is a land that remembers. Its mountains are littered with the bones of animals that fell on gold rush trails. Its rivers still hold the cries of those who drowned seeking fortune. And its highways, those long black veins through the wilderness, carry not only the living, but the ghosts of the Yukon Territory is a place where beauty and dread often walk hand in hand. Its rivers carve through mountains like silver blades. Its forests stretch endlessly into the unknown, and its lakes, still vast and ancient, mirror the sky in a way that makes one feel both awed and watched. Among these waters, one stands out above all others for its eerie reputation. Lake Le Berge, located north of Whitehorse. This lake stretches for more than 50 kilometers. It is wide, cold, and treacherous, known for sudden winds and waves that rise without warning. Its depth hides wrecks of gold rush steamers and the bones of travelers who never reached their destinations. But more than anything else, it is remembered for its ghosts. They say Lake Le Berge holds the spirits of the drowned, and on certain nights those spirits return to the surface. Fishermen, boaters, and even travelers on the highway that skirts its shore have all reported strange sights. Phantom ships drifting in the mist, voices on the wind, figures walking upon the water. This is the story of the spirit of Lake Le Berge. To understand the lake's hauntings, one must understand its nature. Unlike smaller Yukon lakes, Le Berge is a true inland sea. Its waters are fed by the Yukon River, and its length makes it prone to sudden, violent storms. Sailors say its waves can rival those of the Pacific coast. Temperatures in its depths remain icy year-round, and anyone who falls in has minutes before hypothermia sets in. During the Klondike gold rush of the 1890s, thousands of stampeders crossed Lake Le Berge on makeshift rafts and boats. Many were untrained, poorly equipped, and desperate to reach Dawson City. Storms capsized their vessels by the dozens. Bodies washed ashore for weeks. Survivors recalled screams that echoed long after the drowning had ended. It was during this era that the lake first earned its reputation as cursed. The most enduring legend is of a phantom steamer that glides across the lake on misty nights. First reported in 1903, witnesses describe a sidewheel steamboat lit by lanterns, with shadowy figures standing silently on its deck. It makes no sound. Its wake ripples the water. Yet when approached, it dissolves into fog. One prospector named Frank Donnelly swore he saw it one October night while camped near the shore. He watched in awe as the vessel drifted past, its deck lined with passengers whose faces were pale and blurred. One figure raised an arm as if in warning. Then the ship vanished in a burst of mist, leaving only silence. Frank abandoned his claim and left the Yukon within the month. Modern sightings continue. In 1987, two fishermen reported the same steamer moving across the lake. They thought it was the SS Evelyn, a boat that sank there decades earlier. Yet when they gave chase, it dissolved into nothing. Perhaps the most tragic haunting of Lake Le Berge is tied to a single disaster. In 1898, a group of miners attempted to cross in a large scow overloaded with supplies. A sudden storm struck, capsizing the vessel near mid-lake. Some men clung to barrels, others tried to swim, but the waves swallowed them one by one. Out of 12, only 3 survived. The bodies of the others were never recovered. To this day, boaters report seeing men thrashing in the water near the site, their arms raised in silent pleas. When approached, the figures vanished beneath the waves. One kayaker claimed he felt icy hands brush against his legs as if pulling him down. He barely made it to shore. Locals say the drowned miners have never left, forever replaying their final struggle. Even those who never set foot on the lake are not spared from its hauntings. Drivers along the Alaska Highway near the lake's southern end often report strange sights. One woman, driving home from Whitehorse late at night in 2004, described seeing a figure walking along the frozen surface. She slowed her car, stunned at the thought of someone so far out on the ice. The figure turned its head toward her, though from her distance she could see no face. Then, without a sound, it sank straight down into the ice as though swallowed whole. Another man recalled seeing lights flicker across the lake, like lanterns bobbing in the dark. He assumed they were ice fishers until he realized it was April and the lake was already thawed. The lights drifted upward into the fog and vanished. Lake Le Berge became famous through Robert W. Service's haunting poem, The Cremation of Sam McGee. Though fictional, it drew on real fears of freezing to death in the Yukon's wilderness. The poem describes a man cremated on the frozen shores of the lake, his spirit smiling amid the flames. Since the poem's publication in 1907, tourists have flocked to Lake LeBurge seeking the cabin described in the verses. Some claim the popularity of the tale only stirred the spirits further. One guide swore that in the 1970s he brought a group of tourists to camp by the lake. That night, every single one of them reported the same dream: a man in burnt clothing wandering their campsite asking for warmth. The next morning, the ashes of their fire pit had been disturbed, though no one admitted to touching it. Among the most terrifying modern encounters comes from a fisherman named George Campbell. In 1999, he took his boat out early one morning hoping to beat the crowds. The lake was calm, mist curling over the water. Halfway across, he heard splashing. At first, he thought it was a fish, but then he saw a man thrashing in the water, waving desperately. George rushed to throw him a rope, shouting encouragement. The figure struggled closer, then suddenly, with a terrible clarity, George realized he could see through the man. His face was pale, eyes hollow, body shimmering in the mist. Before George could react, the figure sank soundlessly beneath the surface. Shaken, George cut his trip short. When he returned days later, locals told him others had seen the same apparition for years. Some even recognized the description as matching one of the miners lost in 1898. Among the First Nations of the Yukon, Lake LeBurge is considered a place of great power. The Tahnquechan and other peoples who lived along its shores respected it deeply. Oral traditions speak of water spirits who guard its depths and demand offerings for safe passage. Elders warn against shouting or cursing on the lake, lest one draw attention from the drowned. Many fishermen still toss a pinch of tobacco into the water before setting out. One elder told a researcher in 1991, "The lake keeps what it takes. The ones who drown there don't move on. They walk the shore. They drift on the waves. That's why we don't linger. You leave quickly and you don't look back." Skeptics argue the lake's reputation is born of tragedy and imagination. Mist and fog create illusions. The human brain, primed with tales of ghosts, interprets natural phenomena as hauntings. Underwater currents may stir bubbles or shadows that look like figures, yet these explanations falter in the face of consistent, detailed accounts. How do multiple witnesses describe the same phantom ship, the same drowning men, the same faces? Why do so many see what they cannot explain? Those who have spent nights on Lake LeBurge speak of a chill that goes beyond weather. Even on calm, warm evenings, the air feels heavy, charged with something unseen. Campers report waking in the night to the sound of footsteps along the shore, though no tracks appear in the morning. One couple swore they heard laughter echoing across the water, faint but unmistakable. When they shone a flashlight, the ripples glittered with light as though disturbed by invisible oars. For many, the fear is not of seeing ghosts, but of being pulled in. Locals tell newcomers, "If you fall into LeBurge, don't fight, pray." Lake LeBurge is not merely haunted, it is alive with memory. Every storm, every drowning, every body that sank without return has left its mark. Those who perished there linger, bound to the cold water and the endless mist. Some see the spirits as warnings, urging the living to respect the power of the lake. Others believe the dead are trapped, seeking company in their watery prison. Whatever the case, one truth is undeniable. Lake LeBurge is not just a place on the map. It is a graveyard, a shrine, and a mirror between worlds. So when you drive the highway north of Whitehorse, high in the mountains of central Yukon lies a place that once pulsed with life, ambition, and greed. Today, it is a ghost town in every sense of the word. Keno City, once the center of a booming silver mining district, sits quietly in the shadow of Keno Hill, its streets nearly empty, its buildings relics of another era. But beneath the weathered boards and rusting equipment lies something else, something older, darker, and far less willing to stay buried. The miners who came seeking fortune often found only death, and many believe their spirits linger in the shafts and tunnels of Keno Hill. This is the story of the haunted mines of Keno Hill. The history of Keno begins in the early 1900s, when rich deposits of silver ore were discovered in the mountains. By the 1920s, the area was booming. Prospectors, miners, and their families flooded in, hoping to strike it rich. The mines expanded, shafts driven deep into the rock, and fortunes were made and lost with dizzying speed. But the work was brutal. Men toiled underground for long hours, breathing in dust, handling unstable explosives, and enduring collapses that could crush dozens at a time. Winters were merciless, and medical help was often days away. By the 1960s, most of the mines had closed. Families left. Today, only a handful of residents remain in Kino City, preserving its history for curious travelers. But the mines themselves, abandoned, silent and yawning open into the mountainside, still whisper of the men who never left. One of the earliest and most infamous tragedies took place in shaft number 9 in 1928. A group of miners had been blasting deep underground when the supports gave way. Tons of rock and timber came crashing down, trapping 6 men inside. Rescue teams worked for days, but the unstable tunnels made progress slow. By the time they reached the men, it was too late. The bodies were mangled, their faces frozen in terror. From that moment, shaft number 9 earned a reputation as cursed. Miners claimed to hear voices whispering in the dark. Some swore they felt unseen hands tugging at their equipment. Others refused to work there altogether, saying the dead had claimed the place as their own. Even today, visitors who dare to approach the collapsed entrance report hearing faint knocking sounds, as if someone deep inside is still trying to dig their way out. In the 1940s, a miner named William Bill Harper was known for working late into the night, often staying underground long after his shift had ended. One evening, he failed to return. His co-workers assumed he had stayed to work extra hours, but when they checked the tunnels, they found nothing. The next morning, his body was discovered in a shaft, crushed beneath a slab of rock. His lantern was still burning beside him. Not long after, strange sightings began. Men working in the same tunnels reported seeing a lone figure carrying a lantern in the distance. They would call out, assuming it was Harper, only for the figure to vanish when approached. Over the years, dozens of workers claimed to see the shadow miner, a man with a lantern who appears deep underground, always in places where accidents are about to happen. Some say he is a warning. Others believe he seeks to lead men to the same fate he suffered. In 1963, as the mines were winding down, a foreman named Thomas McBride stayed behind to oversee the final closures. He was a practical man, not given to superstition. He insisted the stories of ghosts were nonsense invented by drunk miners. One winter, Thomas entered one of the old shafts alone to inspect it. When he didn't return, a search party went in. They found his body at the bottom of a flooded drift. No signs of collapse, no evidence of foul play. His flashlight lay nearby, its beam shining upward as though pointing to the surface. The strangest part was his expression. His face was twisted in terror, eyes wide, mouth open as if frozen mid-scream. After that, even the most skeptical men refused to enter the mine. Locals say Thomas still walks the tunnels, a foreman forever patrolling his post, his scream echoing in the darkness. Though the mines closed decades ago, their reputation persists. Adventurers and ghost hunters who visit Kino Hill often share chilling experiences. In 1997, a group of hikers camped near one of the abandoned shafts. Around midnight, they awoke to the sound of pickaxes striking rock. At first, they thought it was an echo, but the sound grew louder, joined by muffled voices speaking in a language none of them recognized. When they shone their flashlights, the noise ceased instantly. In 2012, a tourist exploring an old adit near the summit felt the air grow icy cold. His breath came out in clouds despite the summer sun outside. Then, from the darkness, he saw the faint glow of a lantern moving toward him. Panicked, he stumbled out, falling and injuring his ankle. Later, he told locals that the light had followed him almost to the entrance before vanishing. Residents of Kino City quietly admit these stories are common. One elderly man said, "You don't go near the mines after dark. You hear them working still, the ones who never got out. And if you listen too close, they might notice you." Kino City today has a small mining museum, displaying artifacts from its boom years. Helmets, lamps, and tools line the shelves. But even here, the past seems unwilling to rest. Staff members say objects sometimes move on their own. A lantern shifts position overnight. A helmet falls without anyone touching it. Visitors report feeling watched as they examine the exhibits. One worker cleaning late one evening swore he heard footsteps behind him. When he turned, no one was there. But in the reflection of a glass case, he saw a figure in a miner's helmet standing just over his shoulder. For the First Nations who lived near Kino Hill long before mining began, the mountain itself was sacred. Elders warned that disturbing the earth could awaken spirits best left undisturbed. Many locals believe the hauntings are not just the restless dead, but the anger of the land itself, punishing those who dug too deep. A Ta'anquechan elder once told a historian, the miners thought they were taking silver, but the mountain took them instead, and it keeps them still. Perhaps the most unsettling belief among Kino residents is that those who die in the mines cannot leave. Their souls remain bound to the rock, their final cries echoing endlessly through the tunnels. Hikers claim to hear faint knocking when they press their ears to the timbers of collapsed entrances. Some say if you knock back, the sound will return, 3 slow taps from deep underground. The bravest or most foolish have tested it, and they swear the tapping never stops until you run. Kino City today is quiet. The wind whistles through abandoned cabins, and rusting equipment lies scattered on the hillsides. The mines gape like wounds in the earth, their entrances dark and unwelcoming. But silence here is deceptive. Beneath the surface, echoes persist. The ghosts of Kino Hill have no intention of fading. Visitors who leave at dusk often glance back at the mountainside and swear they see faint lantern lights bobbing in the darkness. Some say they hear the ring of metal on stone carried on the wind, long after human hands laid down their tools. Locals who share the tales always end with the same advice. Respect the mines. Don't go in. Don't listen too closely. And if you see a lantern deep... The Yukon River is a lifeline that has shaped the land for centuries. It winds for more than 3,000 kilometers, carving valleys, feeding villages, and guiding both indigenous peoples and gold rush stampeders through the wilderness. It is beautiful, vast, and often deadly. Few places on this river are as feared as Five Finger Rapids. Located between Carmacks and Dawson City, this narrow, violent section of the river forces the current through 4 tall rock pillars that rise like black teeth from the water. The name comes from the way the river splits into 5 channels, 4 of which are nearly impossible to navigate. Only one narrow passage is safe, and even that is treacherous. During the Klondike Gold Rush, hundreds of men and women perished here, their rafts dashed to pieces, their bodies swallowed by the icy water. Their cries echoed downriver for hours. Even today, boaters speak of the same chilling sound, a woman's voice, weeping in the dark. This is the story of the crying woman of Five Finger Rapids. To stand on the cliffs above the rapids is to feel the river's fury. The water turns white as it slams against the rock towers, mist rising like smoke. The roar is constant, a growl that vibrates in the bones. Ravens circle above, their calls sharp against the thunder below. It is a place that humbles even the strongest. For indigenous peoples, it was a site of respect and ceremony. For the Gold Rush stampeders, it was a gauntlet, a passage that could not be avoided on the journey to Dawson. Many never made it through, and according to countless stories, one of them never left. The earliest tale of the crying woman comes from the 1890s. A group of stampeders reported hearing sobbing as they camped on the riverbank, waiting for dawn to attempt the rapids. At first, they assumed it was another prospector mourning a loss. But when they searched, they found no one. The sobs seemed to come from the rapids themselves, rising and falling with the crashing waves. The next morning, one of the men drowned attempting the crossing. His companions swore the sobbing grew louder after his death. Word spread quickly. The rapids had a spirit, a woman doomed to cry for those who perished. Some said she had lost her husband and children there, and her grief bound her to the water. Others believed she was a warning spirit. Her cries meant to keep the living away. One of the most popular versions of the legend is the story of the drowned bride. In 1901, a young woman from Dawson was said to be traveling downriver with her new husband. Their raft struck the rocks and shattered. The groom survived, but his bride was swept away. For days he searched the riverbanks, but her body was never recovered. Soon after, boaters began hearing the sound of a woman crying in the mist. Some claimed to see her as well, a pale figure standing on the rocks, her dress dripping wet, her hair plastered to her face. She would reach out as if begging for help, only to dissolve when approached. The groom left the Yukon shortly after. But the crying woman stayed. Modern witnesses continue to report the same chilling experiences. In 1978, a group of canoeists camping near the rapids woke to the sound of a woman's sobs. They assumed it was a prank by another group upriver, But when they searched, they found only the dark forest and the endless roar of the water. Later that night, one of them swore he saw a figure standing on a rock in the center of the rapids, her hands covering her face. The others dismissed it, until they too heard a scream echoing over the waves. In 1994, a tour boat captain told passengers to listen closely as they approached the rapids. He said, "Sometimes the water cries for its dead." Moments later, several people heard it. Faint sobbing carried on the wind, distinct from the roar of the water. Some grew so frightened they demanded to turn back. Most recently, in 2011, a kayaker paddling alone reported hearing weeping from behind him. He turned expecting to see another paddler, but found only empty water. The sound followed him all the way through the rapids. Many who have heard the crying woman also describe feeling an overwhelming pull toward the rapids. Some liken it to hypnosis, the sound luring them closer, urging them to let go and drift into the waves. One survivor recounted that in 1982, as his canoe neared the rapids, he felt a strange calm wash over him. The sobbing grew louder, almost soothing. He set down his paddle, ready to surrender. Only the frantic shouts of his companions snapped him back. He survived, but to this day he swears he came within seconds of giving himself to the crying woman. Among the First Nations people of the region, the rapids have long been a place of power. Elders say the crying woman is not merely a ghost, but a manifestation of the river itself, a spirit mourning the countless lives it has claimed. One elder told a researcher, "The river is alive. It remembers. Those who die there are not gone. Their voices mix with the water, and sometimes you can hear them." The woman is the loudest, but she is not alone. For locals, the sobs are a reminder of respect. No one crosses the rapids lightly. Skeptics argue the cries are an illusion. The roar of the water bouncing off cliffs can create strange sounds. Mist and moonlight can play tricks on the eyes. But even skeptics admit one thing: the accounts are too consistent. Too many people, across decades, describe the same sobbing voice, the same sense of sorrow, the same pale figure reaching from the rocks. One of the most chilling encounters occurred in the summer of 2007. Two men from Carmax decided to fish near the rapids at night, despite warnings. As they cast their lines, the sound of sobbing drifted across the water. They froze, staring at one another. Then, from the mist, they saw her, a woman, waist-deep in the river, her hair floating around her like black weeds. Her face was pale, her eyes dark hollows. She opened her mouth as if to scream, but the sound that came was a chorus of voices. Men, women, children, all crying at once. The fishermen fled in terror, abandoning their gear. To this day, they refuse to speak of it in detail. Some believe the crying woman is not a curse, but a guardian. Her sobs, they say, are a warning to travelers, urging them to respect the rapids' danger. Those who heed her cries often wait for calmer conditions or choose safer routes. Those who ignore them sometimes vanish. RCMP reports note at least a dozen drownings at Five Finger Rapids since the 1960s. In many of these cases, surviving companions claim to hear a scream just before the accident. Even for those who never see the rapids up close, the legend spreads unease. Drivers along the highway that runs near the river sometimes pull over, hearing what they think is a woman weeping in the forest. Hikers camped miles away wake to the same sound, carried eerily on the wind, and always when they investigate. The Yukon is a land of shadows, silence, and secrets. Its wilderness stretches for thousands of kilometers, an endless quilt of dark forests, frozen lakes, and lonely mountain roads. Travelers often speak of the silence here, not the ordinary quiet of countryside, but a heavy stillness that makes every crack of a branch, every gust of wind, feel amplified. But in some corners of the Yukon, silence is not the only thing that waits. There are places where strange lights flicker across the horizon. They are not headlights, not lanterns, and not the northern lights. These are orbs of pale fire that glide just above the trees, hovering over water, or drifting across highways before vanishing in an instant. One such place, notorious for these sightings, is Fox Lake, a long, cold stretch of water along the Klondike Highway, about 60 kilometers north of Whitehorse. Here, countless drivers, campers, and locals have reported the same thing: glowing spheres of light that appear without warning, float silently across the lake or the forest, and sometimes follow travelers for miles. Some describe them as beautiful. Others say they are malicious, leading people toward danger. The phenomenon is known simply as the ghost lights of Fox Lake. Long before the Klondike Highway was carved into the land, the indigenous people of the Yukon spoke of strange lights near Fox Lake. Oral traditions tell of spirits of the drowned, souls unable to find peace, drifting across the water at night in the form of flickering flames. According to one elder's account, the lights are not stars. They are people. They are those who wander between this world and the next. They come to remind us that the lake keeps what it takes. During the gold rush, stampeders traveling north on foot and by raft also described mysterious orbs on the shoreline. Some thought they were campfires, but when they approached, the flames vanished, and so the legend grew. Fox Lake was haunted, its shores alive with restless souls. Today, the Klondike Highway runs along the eastern edge of Fox Lake. It is a beautiful drive in daylight, towering pines, glimpses of water between the trees, mountains rising in the distance. But at night, it becomes a different world. The road stretches endlessly, swallowed in darkness, with only the thin beam of headlights cutting through. The forest presses close on either side, and beyond, the lake lies flat and black as glass. It is here, late at night, that drivers report seeing the lights. Some appear ahead on the road, glowing white or pale blue, hovering just above the asphalt. Others drift slowly across the water, reflecting faintly in the ripples before disappearing. The strangest reports describe the lights following cars, keeping pace just behind the vehicle no matter how fast it goes, vanishing only when the driver stops in terror. Truckers who run the Yukon routes often share stories of Fox Lake. One testimony comes from a driver named Bill, who recalled a night in 1987. I was hauling north, middle of the night, no one else on the road. I saw a light up ahead, thought it was another vehicle. But as I got closer, it lifted off the ground and floated across the highway, slow as you please, bright as a headlamp, but round like a ball. I slammed the brakes and it just drifted right through the trees and was gone. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I'd pass out. Another trucker reported two lights chasing his rig along the highway, staying just behind his trailer for nearly 10 minutes. When he finally pulled into a rest stop, they vanished instantly. He swore he smelled smoke in his cab afterward, though nothing was burning. In the summer of 1996, a group of friends camped on the eastern shore of Fox Lake. Around midnight, they saw glowing orbs rising from the water, one after another, until 6 floated silently above the lake. They hovered for nearly half an hour, shifting colors from white to blue to green, before winking out one by one. The campers were terrified. One swore he heard faint voices in the night air, whispers carried on the wind, though no other camps were nearby. Another claimed the orbs seemed to be watching them, almost curious. When morning came, they left immediately, abandoning much of their gear. Scientists and skeptics often point to natural causes. They suggest the lights could be ignis fatuus, also known as will-o'-the-wisps, a phenomenon where gases from decaying plants ignite spontaneously in marshy ground. Others argue they might be ball lightning, a rare but documented weather event where glowing spheres of electricity form during thunderstorms. But neither explanation satisfies locals. The lights appear in clear weather, in winter, over open water, and even high above the trees. Too many witnesses, too many stories, and besides, the lights don't just exist, they seem to interact. One of the most chilling stories comes from 2003, when a Whitehorse couple was driving north past Fox Lake. They noticed taillights ahead and assumed another car was on the road. But as they followed, the red glow rose into the air and drifted into the forest. Confused, they sped forward, expecting to see the vehicle that belonged to the lights. But there was nothing. No car, no tracks, only darkness. The couple later learned that just weeks earlier, a man had died in a crash along that stretch of highway. His vehicle had been dragged into the trees. The implication was clear. The taillights they saw did not belong to the living. Fox Lake has claimed many lives. Its waters are deceptively cold even in summer. Swimmers and boaters often underestimate how quickly hypothermia sets in. Some never resurface. Locals believe the ghost lights belong to these drowning victims. Fishermen tell of seeing orbs hovering above the water on nights after a drowning, as if the souls of the lost were marking the place of their death. One chilling account comes from 2015, when a man drowned after his canoe capsized. The Yukon is a land of shadows, silence, and secrets. Its wilderness stretches for thousands of kilometers, an endless quilt of dark forests, frozen lakes, and lonely mountain roads. Travelers often speak of the silence here, not the ordinary quiet of countryside, but a heavy stillness that makes every crack of a branch, every gust of wind, feel amplified. But in some corners of the Yukon, silence is not the only thing that waits. There are places where strange lights flicker across the horizon. They are not headlights, not lanterns, and not the northern lights. These are orbs of pale fire that glide just above the trees, hovering over water, or drifting across highways before vanishing in an instant. One such place, notorious for these sightings, is Fox Lake, a long, cold stretch of water along the Klondike Highway, about 60 kilometers north of Whitehorse. Here, countless drivers, campers, and locals have reported the same thing: glowing spheres of light that appear without warning, float silently across the lake or the forest, and sometimes follow travelers for miles. Some describe them as beautiful. Others say they are malicious, leading people toward danger. The phenomenon is known simply as the ghost lights of Fox Lake. Long before the Klondike Highway was carved into the land, the indigenous people of the Yukon spoke of strange lights near Fox Lake. Oral traditions tell of spirits of the drowned, souls unable to find peace, drifting across the water at night in the form of flickering flames. According to one elder's account, the lights are not stars. They are people. They are those who wander between this world and the next. They come to remind us that the lake keeps what it takes. During the gold rush, stampeders traveling north on foot and by raft also described mysterious orbs on the shoreline. Some thought they were campfires, but when they approached, the flames vanished, and so the legend grew. Fox Lake was haunted, its shores alive with restless souls. Today, the Klondike Highway runs along the eastern edge of Fox Lake. It is a beautiful drive in daylight, towering pines, glimpses of water between the trees, mountains rising in the distance. But at night, it becomes a different world. The road stretches endlessly, swallowed in darkness, with only the thin beam of headlights cutting through. The forest presses close on either side, and beyond, the lake lies flat and black as glass. It is here, late at night, that drivers report seeing the lights. Some appear ahead on the road, glowing white or pale blue, hovering just above the asphalt. Others drift slowly across the water, reflecting faintly in the ripples before disappearing. The strangest reports describe the lights following cars, keeping pace just behind the vehicle no matter how fast it goes, vanishing only when the driver stops in terror. Truckers who run the Yukon routes often share stories of Fox Lake. One testimony comes from a driver named Bill, who recalled a night in 1987. I was hauling north, middle of the night, no one else on the road. I saw a light up ahead, thought it was another vehicle. But as I got closer, it lifted off the ground and floated across the highway, slow as you please, bright as a headlamp, but round like a ball. I slammed the brakes and it just drifted right through the trees and was gone. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I'd pass out. Another trucker reported two lights chasing his rig along the highway, staying just behind his trailer for nearly 10 minutes. When he finally pulled into a rest stop, they vanished instantly. He swore he smelled smoke in his cab afterward, though nothing was burning. In the summer of 1996, a group of friends camped on the eastern shore of Fox Lake. Around midnight, they saw glowing orbs rising from the water, one after another, until 6 floated silently above the lake, They hovered for nearly half an hour, shifting colors from white to blue to green, before winking out one by one. The campers were terrified. One swore he heard faint voices in the night air, whispers carried on the wind, though no other camps were nearby. Another claimed the orbs seemed to be watching them, almost curious. When morning came, they left immediately, abandoning much of their gear. Scientists and skeptics often point to natural causes. They suggest the lights could be ignis fatuus, also known as will-o'-the-wisps, a phenomenon where gases from decaying plants ignite spontaneously in marshy ground. Others argue they might be ball lightning, a rare but documented weather event where glowing spheres of electricity form during thunderstorms. But neither explanation satisfies locals. The lights appear in clear weather, in winter, over open water, and even high above the trees. Too many witnesses, too many stories, and besides, the lights don't just exist, they seem to interact. One of the most chilling stories comes from 2003, when a Whitehorse couple was driving north past Fox Lake. They noticed taillights ahead and assumed another car was on the road. But as they followed, the red glow rose into the air and drifted into the forest. Confused, they sped forward, expecting to see the vehicle that belonged to the lights. But there was nothing. No car, no tracks, only darkness. The couple later learned that just weeks earlier, a man had died in a crash along that stretch of highway. His vehicle had been dragged into the trees. The implication was clear. The taillights they saw did not belong to the living. Fox Lake has claimed many lives. Its waters are deceptively cold even in summer. Swimmers and boaters often underestimate how quickly hypothermia sets in. Some never resurface. Locals believe the ghost lights belong to these drowning victims. Fishermen tell of seeing orbs hovering above the water on nights after a drowning, as if the souls of the lost were marking the place of their death. One chilling account comes from 2015, when a man drowned after his canoe capsized. That very night, several drivers reported strange lights hovering above the water near where the accident occurred. For weeks after, the lights appeared again and again, until finally fading away. Perhaps the most terrifying encounters are those where the lights follow travelers. In 2018, a young woman driving home to Carmax described being chased for nearly 20 kilometers. A glowing orb appeared behind her car, floating just above the road. No matter how fast she drove, it stayed with her, pulsing brighter the longer she fled. She described feeling a strange pressure in her chest, as if